Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Oddities video. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll make another entry here based on your suggestion. This one has to do with a suggestion that I kind of mulled over which category really to put it in, because there's definitely some aspects in it that could tie it into the Ghost and Spirit series, but the reason I wasn't doing it there is because there isn't really one specific ghost or spirit to talk about. And then as far as the urban legend side, it could have worked in there, but there's more, I guess, facts associated to it. Like, people have witnessed these things as opposed to it being a small number of people. Instead, a larger number of people have witnessed it. So I decided to add it here on the Mysteries and Oddities side, because to this day the biggest mystery tied to it has to do with what this thing was built over. That definitely fascinated me. So when you have that kind of tantalizing mystery, that's when I realized it's best to put it here. So it has to do with a castle that has a notorious history ever since it was built, and the main reason for it was because why it was built, and it has to do with this. This is called the Houska Castle. Hope I'm saying that correctly, but it is a very, very old castle located north of Prague in the Czech Republic. A lot of history associated with it, a lot of it still to this day being quite eerie when you think about it, quite creepy. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about all that information here. So what is this Houska Castle? Well, it's an early Gothic castle that you have to go to the Czech Republic for, specifically almost 30 miles north of Prague. Very old castle, as I mentioned, because this was something that was built in sometime the first half of the 13th century. So unbelievable. We're talking about something that has been around for hundreds of years. Amazing when you think about it. Like, today's houses can barely stand like 50 years, and here's a bunch of castles that I've named in some of my past videos that have been around for hundreds of years. So very, very interesting. This castle was built on the orders of some ruler, someone by the name of Ottokar II of Bohemia, and it was basically going to be used as some form of administration center. That's pretty much it as far as its origins. The most interesting thing, though, that I wanted to mention has to do with why it was built. So cut to a little bit of time before this castle was even built. According to folklore, there's the idea that on that very spot of land there used to be a large hole of some sort. Unknown where these origins of this hole came from, but there it was. There was this gigantic hole right on that piece of land, and it attracted so much notoriety, of course, because of its location, because of its size, because of its mystery. Because this hole, whenever apparently you stared into it, it was so deep, and there was no way really of measuring it, that it was considered by everyone there in that area as being literally bottomless. I'm guessing that people used to throw things into it, maybe waiting to see if they could hear some kind of impact later on, but who knows. Whatever it was that they tested, from their perspective, they considered it truly a bottomless pit. Not only that, but there were some other very strange things, very mysterious things happening around that hole. A lot of those villagers that were around that area also reported seeing these black winged creatures that would fly in near and around that hole, and then crawling out of that hole they would also see these half human, half animal beings. That's how they described it. So if you're adding 2 plus 2, you're dealing with a hole that goes into the ground, seems bottomless, and now you're dealing with these creatures that seem like from another dimension of some sort. Then people started to think, oh my goodness, this is something involving hell itself. This could actually be the gate to hell, and that's one of the nicknames associated with this Houska Castle. It's considered also to be the gate of hell, and so because of it, the local villagers decided to take some action to it. By the way, there was one more experiment tied to this hole to try to see what is on the bottom of it. So according again to folklore, they decided that they needed like a set of guinea pigs to be able to take care of that experiment. What better way than to utilize men that were in prison at that time specifically to be executed soon? And the whole reasoning was this thing, they had no idea, of course, what was at the bottom. They didn't want to risk things themselves, so they offered a tantalizing offer to these men, and it was basically this: if they were able to be lowered into the hole, of course voluntarily, and they were able to report what they found at the bottom of the hole, then that was it. They were essentially pardoned. That was the risk tied to it and the reward tied to it. So sure enough, there was one of the prisoners, one who was going to be executed, that decided to go ahead and take this route, because who knows, if they were able to get out successfully, then at least they would be pardoned thereafter. So they lowered this prisoner into the pit, and shortly thereafter, I guess no doubt after the darkness of the hole completely swallowed him, that's when the folklore states that this prisoner began to scream and scream and scream, like it was just uncontrollable screaming, just almost primal screaming, the kind where it's something is scaring the wits out of that person, and they have no control anymore about their whereabouts. And they heard him begging, please pull him back up, pull him back up. And when they did so, they found out that this prisoner had turned completely white, like the hair on this prisoner, whatever it was that they witnessed down there, was absolutely just so frightening that their hair turned white. And even more frightening was the fact that this encounter actually aged the prisoner. It seemed like within just a few minutes within that hole, when he came out, he was actually aged by a good number of years. So quite eerie when you think about it, because whatever this hole was, whatever was at the bottom of it, then it definitely created this frightful impact to him. So much so that the prisoner, even though they were, I guess, pardoned thereafter, he was so crazy from the experience that he ended up being in a mental institution and then died of unknown causes 2 days later after the encounter there. So very, very crazy stuff. Now, because of this, the villagers there decided that they wanted to stop whatever it was that was coming out of this hole, either going in or going out of it. So that's where the castle comes into play. So the official reasoning again was, as I mentioned earlier, it was going to serve as some kind of civic administration center of some sort for the ruling party there. But no, it seems like the unofficial reasoning was, let's build a castle over this hole, and then that way whatever it was, these gates of hells that was allowing these creatures to go in and out, would essentially be blocked. And on top of that, to make sure that this thing, whatever it was that led down to hell, would be blocked, they had a chapel built right on top of the hole itself. In fact, you're looking at some pictures of the chapel right now. So what better way to do so when you're dealing with something along that realm? The idea of having something very religious, I guess, built on top of this gate of hell, and then that way anything underneath it would have no chance of being able to escape, like being able to pry open the concrete or whatever is the material there, so that way they can escape outward. Now, as far as cut to today, and I guess more recent times, and the infamy associated with this hole, if you go back to World War II, there's the idea that in this castle, I mean, ever since the castle was built over the hole, there's been a lot of crazy, unusual things happening within that castle itself. So in World War II, there's the idea that the Nazis themselves used this castle as a way to perform various experiments, perhaps those tied into the occult. Much like I mentioned in one of my other videos with that great movie Hellboy, there's the idea that during that time, various departments of the Nazis were experimenting with the occult to try to gain an advantage in the war. Well, some folklore also ties that to this castle too. Apparently these experiments involved trying to find gateways either into that portion of hell or into other dimensions itself. And the proof of this seems to be the fact that 3 Nazi soldier bodies were found within the castles, if you can believe it. Like, they were found unearthed within the castle. So at least it leads some credence to the idea that yes, there were indeed Nazis at some point within that castle. castle. As to whether they were doing those kind of experiments, who knows? But at least at one point they were there. And then as far as other strange encounters, strange things happening in the castle, there's experiences involving these black winged, what called demons, the ones that are seen inside the castle flying around. I guess people that encounter these things, they don't really seem to have too much of like a bad effect afterward. Like no harm seems to be reported, but still, imagining encountering something like this, these black winged demons, that would be absolutely something so frightful. There's some blonde-haired woman that apparently roams those dark corridors of the castle. I imagine all of this is happening at night too, because in a lot of the pictures I was looking at, it seems like this is absolutely a touristy place to visit. So lots of daytime pictures, lots of tourists around, but I imagine all these things seem to be happening at night instead. And then that chapel, the one I mentioned earlier, that was built right on top of that hole, apparently if you go there to that chapel, underneath or somewhere there, you'll start hearing these screams and these moans coming right underneath the area that the hole used to be at, the open part of it. So if you go there to that castle, you're supposed to be hearing that, and then also you hear like these thuds from underneath that portion too, almost as if something is trying to unearth itself yet again from that hole as well. That would freak the hell out of me. Imagine being in that quiet room, and then underneath your feet you absolutely hear like these bone chilling like screams of some sort coming from underneath that location. Obviously nothing's supposed to be there, but there you are hearing it as well. And then finally, one of the other experiences that people see and hear within that castle is they witness apparently a lot of people chained together. I guess people trapped in hell. I guess they make some manifestation within the castle, and they have these black dogs that are just snarling at them. I guess these hell dogs that are just brutalizing these people, because there they are trapped in hell, and yet people can see them, I guess, in the castle as they would be in hell, and they see them essentially being led by these dogs, these hell dogs, as they're nipping at their legs, knowing of course that they're in a situation that they have no control over. So that is quite another eerie sight too. But that's it. That's all the info tied to the mysteries associated with this Houska Castle. If you go with that notion again that the main reason it was built was because there was a hole to the gate of hell of some sort, and that blocked it, then that adds so much more intrigue with this castle. If anyone has ever been there before, anybody that has visited, anybody that knows someone that paid a visit to that, please post those comments below. It'd be great to hear. If you've seen those aerial pictures now within my video, you'll see that it seems quite eerie that there was this castle, and then at the top part of it is essentially empty, like it's like a giant O, and the middle portion of it is just something that's open and allows all the sunlight, everything to go through. So imagine that. Sometimes like you would imagine like other homes being built and the roof is completely covered, but no, in this case it's purposely shaped like some kind of O of some sort. So it makes it fascinating to think that somewhere within that region, especially within the chapel, that's where this so-called gate of hell is located at. So anyways, thank you so much as always, everybody. Take care.